It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
He who controls the weather controls the world. That quote from former U.S. President Lyndon Johnson all the way back in 1962. Perhaps Johnson was right, at least until there's nothing left of the planet to salvage. This week from MSN and the UK Daily Mail. Secret weather program allegedly exposes Americans to toxic chemicals and deadly UV rays. This is international coverage. We are gaining ground in this battle. This report is based on my interview with the UK Daily Mail. The report states a longtime geoengineering activist has warned that a secret weather control program is exposing Americans to toxic chemicals and dangerous ultraviolet radiation. The report continues. Dane Wigington, founder of Geoengineeringwatch.org, argued that governments and the military have been dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere for decades to hide the true severity of climate change, aka abrupt climate collapse. That's the more correct science term. They continue. He outlined the theory to dailymail.com, claiming aircraft began releasing aluminum-based particulates shortly after World War II, matter of historical record. The report continues, quote, among his most alarming assertions was that UVC radiation, the most dangerous form of ultraviolet light and normally blocked entirely by Earth's atmosphere, is now reaching the surface. He said signs of extreme UV exposure can be seen in nearby forests where sunlight appears to burn the outer layers of trees. No peer-reviewed data confirms that UVC is reaching ground level. Of course it doesn't. No power structure owned and controlled institution is going to confirm anything like this. How many power structure controlled institutions argued the fact that steel structure high-rise buildings don't fall to the ground at free fall speed, 7 seconds in the case of Building 7, from some furniture burning on the first and second floors? To this day, no one in academia, besides 9/11 architects and engineers with the courage to tell the truth about what happened there, and the American population still waving their flags, pretending to be patriotic and pretending 9/11 was what we were told when it's anything but. For the record, this UK Daily Mail report was, all things considered, quite objective. This author, Rob Waugh, I believe did his best to report everything he could and still get the report published. It continues with this. The claims tie into the long-running chemtrail conspiracy theory, which holds that the government has been spraying dangerous chemicals from commercial airliners, military tankers are core to this equation, although we know other aircraft are being used under certain circumstances to control the weather or influence public health. I would say a sickened, dumbed-down population that's firing on less neurons every single day certainly serves those in power. How many other steps have they taken to greatly debilitate and diminish public health? We could go on that subject, couldn't we? Report then states the vast majority of scientists, the power structure paid for kind, and the U.S. government have repeatedly said that the theory is false. Of course, that's what they said, noting that most trails in the sky are ordinary condensation trails, or contrails, formed when water vapor aircraft exhaust freezes into ice crystals at high altitudes. None of this is true. We have up-close film footage of these aircraft at altitude, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. But again, the author of this article is faced with the dilemma of reporting as much of the official narrative as he has to in order to get this report published. And what's truly alarming is we have some in the, quote, activist truth teller community that are pretending this official narrative is true, that are pushing the it's just jet exhaust narrative. That's perplexing, isn't it? While they're rattling their tin cups asking for your donations. Report then states, despite widespread scientific pushback, the idea has gained traction among some political figures, many political figures. I'll get to that in a moment, including Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Actually, unfortunately, RFK, who has interviewed me for an hour on this subject, has decided to go with the it's just jet exhaust narrative. That's truly unfortunate. The report then states, Wigington, a former energy sector employee who now manages a wildlife preserve near Lake Shasta, says his activism began after detecting unusually high aluminum levels in local rainwater. Let's stop there. Just for the record, unusually high isn't the correct term for the amount of bioavailable aluminum nanoparticles contained in the rain over my off-grid wilderness home. Shockingly high levels is more accurate. Highly toxic rain from an initial rain test of 7 parts per billion, which was already highly unusual and should not have been the case. There shouldn't be any detectable aluminum in a filtered forested location where I live, away from transportation industry. There's nothing between me really of any significance before you get to Asia. Subsequent tests over the next 18 months saw a single rain event with 3,450 ppb of aluminum in the rain. That is highly toxic rain. What was I to do? After a total of 18 months of ongoing research, ongoing testing, I was forced to face the fact that climate engineering operations were indeed raging in the skies above my head. There was no point in restoring forestry anymore, no point in planting trees anymore, as the soils were being systematically contaminated, root systems with it. In fact, saplings planted here now in this region of Northern California, I know this is the case in other regions as well because I check, the success rate after the first year of planting, 0. Nothing lives past the first year. Conditions are far too harsh now. How many people know that? How many people know the forests that are burning down everywhere are not coming back? They're done. And that is the Earth's primary life support systems, by the way, not coming back. I was forced to face this battle. I did not want this battle. I never wanted what I've had to deal with the last 20 years of my life. But how can I turn away? How can I face myself in the mirror and turn away from this? Moving on. So many bad news breaking headlines to cover in this broadcast. I'll do my best to get to as many as I can, but first, a bit of good news. I testified this week before a South Carolina Senate committee, a bill to ban climate engineering operations over that state, and the bill did clear this hurdle in the hearing this week. Here's the headline from the postandcourier.com. This report is worth looking up and examining. Proposal to ban, quote, chemtrails from South Carolina skies advances in State House. Yes, of course, media insists on the not-so-helpful chemtrails term, but again, this is still another step in the right direction. And more media coverage. From the LA Times, back to the relentless fog in the Central Valley of California. Quote, extreme cloud bank for 16 days now and counting in Central Valley. Record cold December possible only for those under this toxic cloud. The report states the low stratus clouds, which appear to stretch from Bakersfield through Chico and west into the Bay Area and north to Redding, California, by the way, the entire valley, create visibility concerns on roadways and could foster a record cold December. Again, only for those underneath that cloud. I'll get to this in a moment. Report then says from the LA Times, if we continue to hold on to this pattern for a majority of this month, it would definitely put us in the record books for how cool we've been this December. Dense fog has been an almost daily concern since late November. That's a very long time. I look down from my mountaintop location, looking south, I can see about 100 miles on a clear day. It's nothing but a sea of fog. And when it starts to dissipate a little bit in the afternoon around the edges, it just looks like a layer of filth. What is it? What's adding to this? Yes, we know that the atmospheric conditions are core to the equation, high pressure heat dome, stratifying the atmosphere. There's so much going on in our skies, we can't possibly know all the cause and effect. Neither can those who are inflicting this damage on our already dying planet. About that atmospheric manipulation, listen closely. A high pressure system lingering off the California coast is helping to push any possible storms north toward the Pacific Northwest. That's a factor I'll get to in a moment as well. It's fueling eventually downstream the chemical cool downs in the east, but I'll get to that. High pressure zone in Canada, leaving little to interfere with the tenacious clouds over central California. No air movement, still whatever this layer is and the factors contributing to it. Again, the atmosphere has completely changed. We have extreme UV radiation. That's a contributing factor. We have atmospheric stratification. The manipulated high pressure zone is a part of that equation. There are so many factors forcing the climate system at this point. We can't possibly know all of them. What we can say definitively, with certainty, there is nothing natural about any of this. And we can't know without specific testing for specific elements what's in the whole of our atmospheric air column, which means it's settling into everything, everywhere, every breath we take. Again, about that high pressure zone mentioned in the LA Times report, the atmospheric frequency transmission manipulated kind of high pressure zone. Welcome to the New World. Patented ionosphere heater installations are core to this equation. HARP in Alaska is only one of many. On that note, what's taking place below the sinking air high pressure zone? From Weather Nation, record warmth out west, except for California's Central Valley. That's exactly what the headline states. While everyone under the freakish freezing fog is experiencing cold, everywhere outside of that, it's very warm. T-shirt weather after dark in my location in Northern California, further north of this relentless fog bank. And we had record high temperatures over 6 states. And weather agencies like Weather Channel, Weather Central, Weather Nation are only reporting about a dozen record highs, really over 6 states. That's part of how they skew the equation. It's part of how the controllers are carrying out perception management on populations. They only report a few record highs when there may have been hundreds or more. And about the persistent fog in the Central Valley, much colder temperatures compared to the rest of the state. Just one of the many ways the overall temperature data is intentionally skewed. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Quick footnote. For those that truly want to help sound the alarm, very effective climate engineering awareness-raising materials are available on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org. Full-color printed materials, extremely effective key to the door to wake people up. We pass these on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We also have Geoengineering Watch shirts, different colors now, restock sizes. We have hoodies. These are all exceptional conversation starters on this issue. Once you start a conversation, your foot's in the door. You can wake somebody up. Let's keep going. More on the heavily matrix media sensationalized cold, which is surrounded by warm. From AccuWeather, polar vortex shift poised to unleash more bitter cold across the U.S. through mid-December. That's the headline from the report. More Arctic air is building over northern Canada and will be directed into the United States courtesy of the polar vortex. How long will the cold waves last? ? Will it stay cold through Christmas? ? They continue. As one blast of Arctic air pushes out to sea, a new surge of cold air driven by a breakdown of the polar vortex is already likely to expand from central Canada. The Arctic blasts won't stop there, they say, as more cold waves could follow before the cold waves diminish past the middle of the month. They then say temperatures are projected to dip into the teens next week when and where the wind is blowing, along with other factors. The AccuWeather real field temperatures can be as low as 10 to 20 degrees lower than the actual temperatures. And they try to push those wind chill temperatures, and in their maps, they don't really always show that it's a wind chill, so people think it's much colder than it actually is. Final excerpt from this report. Accompanying many of the waves of Arctic air is likely to be patches of steady snow and episodes of flurries, snow showers, and heavier snow squalls, all of which can make for slippery roads. And what else makes for slippery roads? Surfactants. This is what amounts to soap-soaked snow. Surfactants are what makes soap slippery. Surfactants are a part of the climate engineering mix. Anybody see foaming rain? And it's very common now, by the way. And again, people who thought they knew how to drive in snow now don't, because it's so incredibly slippery. We have warm sides to winter storms and cold sides. Really, snow levels now have nothing to do with elevation anymore. You're either on the warm side of the quote winter storm or the cold side of the winter storm. What does it take for people to wake up and remember what nature was actually like? You didn't have a warm side to a winter storm. All of this is nonsense, absolute nonsense. And the various sizes of frozen whatever that falls down, depending on what chemical mix they're using or what the atmosphere conditions are, and let's all just pretend it's normal. Let's all just pretend it's just jet exhaust. Magical, chemical, ice nucleating jet exhaust. And when you're outside in one of these chemically nucleated snowstorms, and I know this from my remote wilderness location in Northern California, no commercial routes over the top of me. When there's a chemically nucleated event going on, it sounds like I'm at the end of an LAX runway. Are these planes all lost? Spewing their magical chemically nucleating elements? No, this is a sprayed payload dispersion, patented processes, patented elements. So for those pretending that it's just jet exhaust, please stop lying. Tell the truth. The truth will be known soon enough, and those that didn't tell it will be exposed. Moving on, more pieces to the engineered chemical cool-down puzzle. Let's start with this. Another AccuWeather report. Atmospheric rivers to flow into Pacific Northwest, heighten flood and avalanche threats. The report then says successive storms early this week and beyond will trigger flooding, landslides, and high winds in the mountains with impacts that may cascade into affecting regional air and highway travel through the busy holiday period. AccuWeather meteorologists caution that numerous storms will press into the Pacific Northwest over the upcoming weeks, delivering repeated rounds of heavy rain and mountain snow across the region. Fueled by multiple atmospheric rivers, this active pattern carries the potential to unleash flooding, downpours, spark mudslides, halt travel, and elevate the avalanche danger around the mountain peaks. Much of this moisture was not cooled down in time. It's falling as rain very high up in the mountains because they can't cool that much moisture fast enough no matter how much chemical nucleating element they pour on it. Thus, this statement from the report, rising snow levels initially. As the storm evolves, the precipitation type and the associated hazards will change as moisture advances across the Washington Cascades. Forecasters say that rising snow levels keep that in mind again as we head further into winter, rising snow levels because they're pumping in so much moisture so fast they can't cool it off fast enough or as fast as they thought they could. And an influx of warmer Pacific air will shape the risks in the coming days. Summary. Again, as the warmer moisture moves in from the Pacific, the chemical ice nucleation bombardment commences, but not fast enough to cool it down until it gets further inland. The high-pressure dome in the west, I've been over this in many broadcasts. It spins upper-level wind currents and thus moisture flows clockwise around it, and they're pumping it all in through the Pacific Northwest. They need a lot of moisture for these processes, and as that moisture is moving east and they eventually cool it down, that's where the cold starts to appear. That's where the, quote, rain changes over to snow, as if that happened in the past in that way, regardless of the elevation. People don't question anything anymore. It's truly mind-boggling. Again, Chinese government openly announcing they were doing exactly this type of operation. All mainstream media covered it, but if you bring it up in the U.S., those that don't want the truth, that would rather be lied to, will attempt to marginalize you. Don't let that deter you. Their karma, not yours. From phys.org, blend of unusual weather conditions brings trillions of gallons in persistent rain to the Northwest. For all the reasons I've already cited, this report states there is an indication that a new atmospheric river will develop and extend all the way from near Hawaii to the coastal areas of the Northwest on Monday. So says AccuWeather's senior meteorologist, Brett Anderson. Should Brett be sent a link to the Dimming documentary and asked to explain it? You decide. There you have it, though. The coming scheduled weather, fire hose more moisture into the Pacific Northwest, saturate it with chemical ice nucleating elements as the moisture migrates east, and label it, quote, an Arctic blast. Again, the geoengineers need as much moisture in the pipeline as they can get because the chemical nucleation process consumes much of that moisture to create the cool down, just like an evaporative cooler does. Same process, unimaginably huge scale, chemical elements involved in this case. Moving on, another headline, more on the fire hose of moisture being pumped in the Pacific Northwest that's eventually a component to cool regions further east. From NBC News, catastrophic Pacific Northwest floods leave 100,000 facing evacuation. The report states the flooding levels we're looking at are potentially historic. A state emergency has been declared and tens of thousands of people have been ordered to leave their homes in western Washington. After historic rain left rivers at record levels across the state, more than 5 million people were under flood alerts. That was Thursday morning, including parts of Montana and a small part of Idaho. 10 to 18 inches of rain fell, 10 to 18 inches, and we can't get a drop in parts of the Southwest over the Cascade and Olympic mountain ranges in the last 72 hours. That's a hallmark of climate engineering, by the way, drought deluge scenarios. And when these weather fronts are moving in, these ARs, atmospheric rivers, what are the weather terrorists up to? They're spraying the hell out of our formerly blue skies. The script-reading matrix media climate engineering denying cowards that call themselves weather experts commonly use terms like hazy sunshine, partial sunshine, some sun, partly sunny. The list goes on. And on so many of the days that are labeled with these terms, there are few natural clouds in the sky or none, just jet-sprayed filth that spreads out into a canopy of sun-blocking toxic haze. And no, again, it isn't jet exhaust, as several seemingly very motivated disinformation sources and individuals would like you to believe. What we see and have seen in our formerly blue skies is a climate engineering weather warfare sprayed aerosol dispersion. an indisputable conclusion backed by mountains of data, documents, film footage, and photos. Geoengineeringwatch.org is the only agency that has done this type of testing, that has taken a NOAA flying lab to altitude, that has taken a private jet testing platform to altitude, top scientists in it, samples taken, processed at one of the world's most renowned testing institutions. And these people pushing the just jet exhaust narrative had done none of this. They simply, for reasons we can all speculate about, are motivated to make you believe that what we see in our skies is just jet exhaust. Nothing to see here. Move along. If the "it's just jet exhaust" disinformation sources aren't being paid by the controllers or the climate engineers, they should be, because they're most definitely assisting the controllers' attempts to cover the tracks of the climate engineers, pretending to fight climate engineering while at the same time denying it and pandering for your donation. Moving on, more weather temperature whiplash. What's the weather like? Away from these super sensationalized climate engineering chemical cooldowns from the Weather Channel. This new headline, quote, "What cold? Question mark. Parts of the West are basking in record warmth this week." The report then states, record warm mid-December temperatures are forecast for parts of the West. It's already happening and scheduled to get worse. Higher temperatures still through the weekend, even as parts of the Midwest and East shiver in brutal cold. The nation's hottest temperature Tuesday was in Southern California. Both Escondido, Yorba Linda, and Orange County soared to 88 degrees. It's gone higher since. It's gotten over 90 now near the end of the week. Nobody really reports on that. All they want you to see is the cold, cold, cold. The report then says in the Southern California mountains, Big Bear, that's home turf for me where I grew up, set an all-time December record of 72 degrees. A lot of these records were broken by nearly 10 degrees, and nobody really says anything, and they only report a small portion of the record high temperatures. And even while being soaked by an atmospheric river, Seattle set a record high. Think about that. Rain pouring into that part of the world, and it still hit a record high just before midnight. On top of that, the jet stream over the west coast has bulged northward toward Washington State and British Columbia. High-pressure heat dome, it's wrapping around it. That's exactly what I've described for so many years on so many broadcasts. If this was summer, we'd probably call that high-pressure area a heat dome. Yes, exactly. Ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome. Report then says, near that ridge, air is slowly sinking, maximizing sunshine and keeping any Pacific storms and Arctic air away from the southwest. That sinking air is also contributing to the stubborn fog in California's Central Valley, exactly as I stated in last week's broadcast, earlier in this week's broadcast. For the record, there's been more than 2 daily warm records tied or set for every one cold record in 2025, and that's in spite of the fact that they report far few warm records than there actually are. You can have 10 times the real estate under warmth, and they'll report half the amount of records as they do if there's a chemical cool down. Add that up. Here's another headline on what Matrix Media, the controllers, and the climate engineers would rather you didn't know. From the San Francisco Chronicle, the Sierra is a sad bear sight this year. Bad news for Californians eager to flock to winter playgrounds as the holidays approach. For those that might remember the highly sensationalized Boston snow, they kept piling up in one place, kept sensationalizing it in the winter of, I believe, 2014. What didn't they tell us that year? At the same time that they're focused on the winter snow in Boston, there was no snow 14,000 feet up in the Sierras. Nobody said a word, not Matrix Media. Again, just like the New Orleans snowstorms earlier this year, January 21st. Matrix Media didn't tell you, oh, it's above freezing and raining in much of the polar regions. Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, Siberia, nobody said anything. Over the coming weeks and months, record warm temperatures will continue to accelerate and expand, even though only a fraction, again, of the high temperature records are being currently reported. To those that are still clinging to denial regarding the unfolding and accelerating planetary meltdown, the completely engineered jet stream moisture manipulations, the chemicalized nucleation jet spray dispersions are becoming ever more difficult for the weather terrorists to pull off, no matter how much spraying they do. Moving on, more headlines. This one from Reuters. Middle East, North Africa temperatures rising twice as fast as global average, says UN Weather Agency. Heat waves in the region are becoming longer and more intense. Droughts in the region, home to 15 of the world's most water-scarce countries, have become more frequent and severe, with the trend of more and longer heat waves recorded in this region since 1981. None of these countries has a military like the U.S. military, do they? Thus, the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48, the most populated portion of the U.S., the most consistently less warm region in the entire world since 2012. That's not nature. It's climate engineering. It's chemical ice nucleation. And yet we have, again, online sources pretending this is signs of a coming ice age or signs of global cooling. Really? How long has that mantra been pushed while the planet continues to get hotter and hotter and hotter? And why don't these sources ever mention chemical ice nucleation operations, which are the source of these flash cooldowns? Because to do so would be to dispute and discredit their deception. From the LA Times, violent conflict over water hit record last year. No surprise, that's going to get worse. Again, climate engineering, the single largest drought-causing factor, period. Has to rain more on a rapidly warming planet. 7% more moisture in the atmosphere for every degree C of warming. We're likely past 3.5 C now. If it's not raining more overall, then there's a factor we're not being told about. That factor is climate engineering. From the UK Guardian, revealed Europe's water reserves drying up due to climate breakdown. It's an abrupt climate collapse. Climate engineering further fueling that process, but not the only factor. Too many people still trying to pretend that nothing hurts the planet. Nothing we do hurts the planet except climate engineering. Or there's those on the other side of the fence that acknowledge all the other forms of human damage that are harming the climate, but ignoring climate engineering. Why can't we build a bridge, focus on this most damaging factor of all of climate engineering, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare? If we can stop that, we can assess the rest. If we don't stop that, the rest won't matter, because we won't be here. Pressing on, another from the UK Guardian. UK farmers lose $800 million after heat and drought cause one of the worst harvests on record. Many now concerned about their ability to make a living in a fast-changing climate after one of the worst grain harvests on record. Again, there's flash drought, there's flash massive hailstorms, there's flash freezes, and they blame everything on nature. This incredibly visible, obvious, inarguable atrocity raging in our skies, the entire global climate science community stating on the record that they want to put jets in the sky to spray particulates that will blot out the sky, make it filthy, dirty, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle. But we're not seeing that. That's exactly what it would look like, they say, but that's not what we're seeing. Welcome to the orbiting asylum. From Nautilus.us, is the drought in the U.S. Southwest permanent? ? Report says reservoirs along the Colorado River, some of the most important stores of water in the nation, are dwindling by the day. It's just the latest phase, the report says, in a drought that has crushed the Southwest over the last 2.5 decades, the driest period the region has seen in over 1,200 years. Not nature, not a cyclical pattern. That whole cyclical pattern narrative, too, absolutely moronic. Example I've given many times. That would be like running someone over in a crosswalk, beating them, burning them, shooting them, stabbing them, and trying to claim to the judge they died of a heart attack. People die. It's normal. It's natural. How incredibly moronic that argument would be. From InsideClimateNews.com, a breaking report on the deluge side of the climate engineering drought deluge scenario. South and Southeast Asia countries are getting overwhelmed by storms. They're getting wiped out. You need to see those pictures to really comprehend it. Report says scientists say storms will bring more rain and destruction as the climate change scenario accelerates. There's no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. It will be exposed sooner than later. And my question to all those that are helping to hide it in whatever way or form, how will the population react to you when they know the part you've played in the climate engineering cover-up? Will that be the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment? Will a justifiably outraged population come looking for all those who have participated in this crime, either actively or passively, to hold them legally and morally accountable? We'll find out. Next, an update on the polar regions, the air conditioners of the planet. First, this note from WFRA meteorologist Jeff Baradelli. He's quite well known. Arctic in disarray, ! He then states, quote, an extremely extreme pattern builds this weekend. Surface temps as much as 60 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. That's lows of negative 60 in Canada, parts of Canada anyway, and 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. That's a high of 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the Arctic Circle in Russia. This is orchestrated, that's the word he uses, by a record-breaking 500 millibar block. Again, think ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure zones, standard deviations from the mean. Shenanigans, he says, and tomfoolery will follow as brutal Arctic air plunges south through Canada, invading the northern U.S. this weekend. Is this all a big joke? for individuals like meteorologist Jeff Baradelli. What does that term even mean now, meteorologist? It means you're qualified to read the scheduled weather script? Because that's in fact exactly what they're doing. From theconversation.com, hundreds of iceberg earthquakes detected at the crumbling end of Antarctica's Doomsday Glacier. That's the Thwaites Glacier. Many ramifications with this that spreads to other parts of the Antarctic Peninsula. And for those that try to tell themselves, oh, it's so far away, it can't affect me, Walmart's still open, I can still buy a Big Mac. Guess again. Those are the air conditioners again of the planet. Once that part of the planet's life support systems disintegrates, it's not just about sea level rise, it's about a runaway greenhouse effect. We are already descending into that scenario. And again, this isn't about Al Gore, it's not about AOC, it's not about any of the environmental groups, it's about reality. All of those entities I just mentioned are involved in criminal hypocrisy by their denial of climate engineering. They need to be exposed as well. So about all that disappearing ice, and yes, it is disappearing. In fact, two films that are must-watches for those that want to know the truth. Watch Chasing Ice. That's not a new film, but is extremely compelling. And film footage that if you don't believe what your own eyes see, there's nothing I can tell you. The latest installment, the second edition of that, is called Chasing Time. Documentation of the cryosphere disintegrating on the planet right now. And what happens then? Thawing methane deposits. Here's an update on the methane monster. It's not about cow flatulence. It's about methane hydrate and clathrate deposits that are thawing, blowing out, migrating into the atmosphere and covering the planet like a layer of glass. There's enough methane hydrate and clathrate deposits on Earth that if they all thaw and release into the atmosphere, Earth will, in very short order, become a true sister to the planet Venus. From Arctic News, the danger of abrupt eruptions of seafloor methane. Vast amounts of methane are held in sediments at the seafloor of oceans in the form of hydrates and in the form of free gas held underneath hydrates. Heat penetrating these sediments it's not a could, may, might equation, destabilize these hydrates and cause huge amounts of methane to abruptly enter the atmosphere. It's already happening. Climate intervention operations in the attempt to mask what's unfolding from the population is actually further fueling the overall process. What a surprise. So what happens when so much ice melts that seawater begins to rise exponentially? Just throw some more tech at it, like this from ZME Science. A radical climate proposal aims to channel seawater into a giant Egyptian desert to fight sea level rise. What a great idea, right? Flooding Egypt's vast depression in the desert with seawater could slightly lower global sea levels and reshape the climate. Could, may, might. What does that do to all those regions? Where are you going to pump the seawater from? What are you going to use for energy to do this? It's utterly and totally insane. The so-called climate science community that proposes we put Brazil-sized balloons in space to block the sun, or we fill the atmosphere with light reflecting mirrors, or we build 10 million wind-powered water pumps in the Arctic, or we cover the polar regions with sun-reflecting tarps. So I could go on and on. This is idiocracy in real time from the so-called experts. Sea levels are rising, the report states, threatening coastal areas, including cities around the world, due to climate change, aka abrupt climate collapse. The global ocean has already risen by 24 centimeters, and a new climate idea, the report says, aims to slow this by pumping seawater to reflood inland depressions. We're going to start pumping seawater into Death Valley, perhaps, or any other low-lying area we can find. This mind-numbingly moronic report ends with suggesting that this type of process could even bring tourism. Really, the tourists are going to flock to a completely dead, toxic body of water pumped into some low-lying desert somewhere with nothing alive in it. Now that makes perfect sense. For those that think technology is going to save us from ourselves, my question is this: how's that going so far? Like the so-called technology of filling our atmosphere with toxic light-scattering particles, all of which are settling down to the surface of the planet, contaminating everything, every breath we take, every bite of food, every drink of water, destroying the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle. That's technology. That's a weather, chemical, and biological weapon used by the controllers, the crown jewel weapon of the controllers. And how many people pretending it isn't happening? And for the record, those in power couldn't do what they do without the active or passive participation of the majority population. When will that end? And far sooner than most can imagine, We're going to find out the answer to that question the hard way, certainly the hard way. Impact is imminent at this point. There's no stopping it. The question now is, can we change the composition of the coming collapse? Can we change the flavor of the concrete wall we're all about to hit at full velocity? If, by our collective efforts, we could expose and halt the atrocities in our skies and allow the planet to respond on its own to the damage done, we may yet buy time. And that's worth fighting for. If we can buy time, we can then evaluate what other steps we might take to salvage some of what yet remains of the planet's life support systems. On that upbeat note, you're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 540, December 13th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, known as geoengineering. Global Alert News aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. And it's easy for them to do this, by the way, because we don't advertise. We don't sell anything. We don't ask anybody for anything. We simply put out the news that most don't hear, many don't want to hear, but need to hear. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Best way to share. Circulate the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. Geoengineeringwatch.org spent well over six figures on this film. We posted it for free the day it was done. There is no monetization. We're here for the mission, nothing else. I live for the day when the atrocities in our skies are fully exposed and halted, and the planet can respond on its own, without this climate engineering straitjacket, this weather warfare straitjacket, this biological warfare in our atmosphere straitjacket. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to circulate critically important data to a far wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't looking up, again, start a conversation. Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality, full-color printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words. We pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. These are the same materials that are circulated to legislators across the country. They were the same materials on the desks of the senators in the testimony I gave this week in South Carolina. These are powerful tools. If the book doesn't wake somebody up, don't waste your time. They're not going to wake up. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, shirts, new colors, new sizes, great conversation starters there. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all of these effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Reaching a critical mass. That is the only way forward in this fight. Until those in a position to help, those participating in these programs like our military brothers and sisters, defense industry contractors, their families, until they know that they are literally participating in their own demise and stand down, we don't have any chance of stopping these operations. We have to reach a critical mass of awareness, and that effort will take all of us. Don't underestimate your own power in this equation. If you share credible data with two people on the first day of a 30-day month, and those two each on the second day, at the end of 30 days, we're into the millions. No, my math is not incorrect. Do the math. That's how an exponential equation grows. But that effort, again, will take all of us. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. And to all those that are doing their best in this battle already, given their individual circumstances and situation, you have my deepest and most profound gratitude. It is our collective efforts that can yet make a difference at this late hour. Moving on. Climate engineering cover-up is directly connected to environmental collapse cover-up. From the Washington Post, the EPA is wiping mention of human-caused climate change from its website. That is part of climate engineering cover-up. For those that jump up and down and cheer like, oh, this is a wonderful thing, no, it's not. This is all connected to climate engineering cover-up. The report states the Environmental Protection Agency has removed references to human-caused climate change from its website, tweaking some pages to focus on the, quote, natural processes driving climate change. Really natural processes like a sky filled with geoengineering jets spewing their toxic elements everywhere. The report says, in wiping other pages from the internet. Bridget Hirsch, EPA press secretary, wrote in an email, as such, this agency no longer takes marching orders from the climate cult. I understand their angst for the global warming community that refuses to acknowledge climate engineering, but these people in our government are doing their best to cover all of it up. Planetary damage and climate engineering, so they can drill baby drill until there's nothing left. How much fuel do you think it takes to power those geoengineering jets all over the world every single day, 24/7, 365? All of it's connected. The UK Guardian, food and carbon fuel production causing 5 billion of environmental damage every single hour. And that's not even a true figure. You can't put a number on destroying planetary processes that aren't coming back in any time frame that matters. What does that mean? 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years? No. Based on past paleo events that weren't nearly as bad as this, tens of millions of years. The planet we have known is done. It's gone. It's not coming back in any time frame that matters. Now the question is, can we salvage any part of it? Can anyone survive the human race's kamikaze swan dive from the top of a 100-story building thinking they're flying? We're passing the second story now. The sidewalk is the next stop. Again, that headline, 5 billion of environmental damage an hour. And what's the administration's EPA doing? Gutting environmental protection, regulation, everything. Gutting it. This is loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until nothing is left, until the absolute moment of impact. Also from the UK Guardian, Africa's forests transformed from carbon sink to carbon source. How many years have I stated that in this broadcast? Why did it take the so-called climate science community so long to catch up? Forests no longer lungs, no longer emitting oxygen. They're actually emitting more carbon than they absorb. How about that? That's what happens when you destroy the ozone layer, when you disrupt the hydrological cycle, when you contaminate rain all over the world. And I'm not just blaming climate engineering. Industrialized, militarized everything is an absolute train wreck. Climate engineering, the epitome of human insanity, however. Greatest and most immediate threat we collectively face, short of nuclear cataclysm, but unfortunately that's also on the menu. From ScienceAlert.com, this new headline, microplastics can spread dangerous pathogens, scientists warn. Yes, they can, can't they? So, as if it isn't bad enough that the now ubiquitous micro and nanoplastics are building up in our brains and internal organs, these biological carrier platforms also carry pathogens. Is that actually a part of the plan? How many times over how many years have I tried to sound the alarm about this, about the fact that polymer nanoparticles, part of climate engineering patents and operations, can, and based on available data likely are, being used as biological carrier platforms. Translation, to transport pathogens from the clouds, the jet-sprayed aerosol kind of clouds, to the ground. How many stop to ponder what all the top secret biolabs around the world are up to? Think they're here to help? Think again. Let's remember what presidential advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, who advised presidents from Lyndon Johnson all the way up to 2017 when he finally died. What did he say again? Oh, yeah. With today's technology, it's infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control them. Keep that in mind. Let's add this. New from MSN, worrying virus resistant to body's defense system as experts warn of looming pandemic threat, end quote. From the report, one of the body's key defenses against infection is a fever, raising its internal temperature to make it harder for viruses to make copies of themselves and cause severe disease. New research from the University of Cambridge in the UK suggests this thermal defense mechanism does not work against bird flu. But wait, it gets worse. Bird flu fatality rates in humans have traditionally been worryingly high, such as in historic H5N1 infections that caused more than 40% mortality. In wild and domestic birds, bird flu has now been detected in every single state in the U.S. since January of 2022. An estimated 174 million wild and domestic birds are estimated to have been affected, more than 1,000 dairy herds. If you think this isn't a potential biological warfare everything, let's keep in mind, according to the Washington Post, as far back as 1977, the U.S. military had already conducted no less than 239 open-air biological tests against innocent and unknowing U.S. civilians. This is business as usual. Report continues. Since September this year, It has struck 7 million farm birds nationwide, including 1.3 million turkeys. Experts warn that infections with bird flu are more common in the fall months because wild birds, which may be carrying the virus, not many wild birds left, at least not where I live. You once couldn't sleep in the mornings, there were so many. Now it's deathly silent. Migrate, potentially spreading the virus to new areas. Haven't seen a single flock of Canadian geese fly over this year, not one. There remain concerns, the report says, that the virus could spread to and learn how to spread between humans. A little help from the biological labs, like the gain of function characteristic, that would probably help that out a long ways, wouldn't it? They say, which could spark a new outbreak similar to the COVID pandemic. What a surprise. Let's add this from ABC News. Mystery swirls after dozens of dead vultures found on campus of Ohio school. That's interesting. Let's add this from the UK Daily Mail. Turkeys in the UK to be vaccinated in a trial amid fears of Christmas bird flu surge. Do they arrange this just in time for the holidays? Turkeys in the UK, they say, are set to be vaccinated in a trial to stamp out the bird flu for the first time as poultry farmers battle a surge in cases ahead of Christmas. Yes, whatever it takes to get that vaccination train going, right? They're always motivated for that. And then let's blame the little birdies, that little tiny sparrow sitting out your window on the tiny tree branch. He's the culprit. It's his fault. Pay no attention to the giant military tanker dumping 100 tons of toxic elements, biological carrier platforms, spewing it into the sky. Tankers all over the globe doing the same. Biolabs all over the globe. Pay no attention to that. It's the tiny sparrow outside your window. It's his fault. Let's press on. Another headline from Yahoo News. Climate change is affecting your food and not in your favor. Every time they say climate change, also add in the word climate engineering, toxic climate engineering. Going to skip to the core of this report, which cites heavy metals such as lead showing up. It says these metals might be increasing in our food. They are. That's not a question. A serious concern, they say, because lead, I don't know why they're referring only to lead, is toxic even at very low levels and can harm the brain and nervous system. First, there's other elements like aluminum, which is toxic to everything at any level, and it does definitely harm the brain, neurological system, a host of downstream everything, and none of that's addressed here. They only give little tiny pieces of the puzzle, don't they? The entire system designed not to disclose what's raining down through our air column. They don't even look for nanoparticles. None of the official air quality testing even looks for nanoparticles. A mountain, 40 to 60 million tons based on our testing with the University of Minnesota, 40 to 60 million tons annually, takes an incredible amount of particulate matter to cover the entire horizon with filth. That's exactly what it is. It's not jet exhaust. It's not condensation, obviously. It's sprayed particulate dispersions. We've proven that. The Dimming documentary proves that conclusively, as do mountains of historical government data, film footage, testing from all over the globe. What does it take for people to realize this is obviously going on? The military has stated years ago on the record the collapsing climate system was, they considered, the greatest national security threat. Do we think they're going to sit around and wait for people to ask them, hey, could you possibly please spray a bunch of filth into our skies and try to hide the warming while you're crushing food supplies and sickening everybody on the planet? Too much to cover. Let me move on. From the UK Guardian, the Guardian view on solar geoengineering. Africa has a point about this risky technology. Should that be a question? Filling the sky with toxic filth, should it be a question? And this article cites that Africa is, of course, concerned because they don't want to be a test bed for unproven schemes. This is 80 years ongoing all over the world, and Africa has been a test bed for everything over many years. They're the guinea pigs for so many of the Western countries. They do whatever they want there. And now they're doing whatever they want here. And for those that don't think that the power structure would do this to their own population, they have no own population. Americans are not just expendable to those in power. They're a rapidly increasing liability. How obvious can that be at this point? The recent so-called safe and effective experiments should be an obvious example to any that don't have their eyes wide shut. Eventually, the truth can come out. And here's one case in point. From CTV News, study that said glyphosate herbicide is safe is now retracted after 25 years since it was published. Imagine that. Finally admitting that the study was bogus from the beginning and that Monsanto paid the authors of the report. What a surprise. A report that was cited 700 times in scientific publications as if it was true when they knew the whole time. It wasn't. Let's keep going. More insanity. From Jacobin.com, lawmakers are rolling back food safety rules. Of course they are. While at the same time claiming they're, quote, making America healthy again. Right? Right. Here's a quick update on the mass consumption of the human race at this point, which has gone totally exponential. For those that think somehow this circus of insanity is in any way sustainable, it isn't. In just 6 years, from 2016 to 2021, and it's gotten way worse since, the human race consumed nearly as much as it did during the previous 100 years. Who could possibly think that's sustainable? Let's add climate engineering, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare in our skies on top of all of that. Pressing on, before I cover the following headlines, this disclaimer. For those that are still buying into the power structure programming that the political parties matter at all, they don't. It's just part of the theater. And that being said, the current puppets in the play are the most dangerous and tyrannical yet. And that's saying a lot. No surprise. As life on Earth circles the drain, literally, bottom line, the current cast of comic book characters in the White House have been and will continue to radically ramp up the climate engineering weather warfare assault. To expect otherwise is delusion. And the previous occupants of the White House, of the other political orchestrated stripe, was doing the same. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Now it's worse than ever. Mafia empires need oil, lots and lots of oil. On that note, from commondreams.org, this headline, Venezuela for the American oil companies will be a field day. So says lawmaker pushing invasion. Quote, they're not even hiding it anymore. A U.S.-led regime change war abroad to line the pockets of big oil. Where have we heard this before? So many times. It's just a rerun of past resource wars. And if the criminal cartel masquerading as our government can't wait for the Venezuelan oil takeover and plundering, just steal oil tankers. Yeah, that'll work. For those that haven't yet been willing to admit to the truth, the entire Venezuela debacle is obviously about oil and not drugs. That fact should not be hard to figure out, as the Orange Man grants a full pardon to a convicted drug-running kingpin. Full pardon. Where is there any sense of outrage in the U.S. population? Where? From the intellectualist.com, Trump frees executive in $1.6 billion fraud case just 12 days into a 7-year sentence, leaving 10,000 victims waiting. From Zetto.com, 6 countries that woed Trump with lavish gifts and what they got in return. The gifts received by Trump are worth 100 times more than the combined value of the gifts received by every other U.S. president since 2001. Let's keep going. Not done yet. And again, the current occupant in the White House, a puppet in the play at the end of the power structure strings, just like the previous occupant, the one before that, the one before that. I'm simply making a point of how bad it is now. Train is totally off the rails. From newzsquare.com, Trump's Ukraine peace plan exposed as a $300 billion profit plot. Hidden deals, Russian assets, and mega donor paydays revealed in bombshell report. This article continues, at the heart of President Trump's high-stakes plan to end the Russia-Ukraine war isn't peace, it's profit. Should that really come as any surprise? On that note, from AOL, business of war, global arms sales smash records as conflicts rage. The business of war has never been more lucrative. That's from the report. Next, Earth's Greatest Enemy documentary, a documentary expose of the world's biggest and most unaccountable polluter, the U.S. military. Learn the environmental cost of having a military empire. Suggested viewing for those that want the truth. From Newsweek, world's largest weapons makers hit highest ever recorded revenues. Think of the insanity of all this. The planet's life support systems are literally imploding. And what are those in power doing? Building bombs and bunkers. And what are too much of the population doing? Tailgate parties at football games, except for those in third world countries that are simply trying to survive another day. And the list of countries in that category is growing by the day. Dozens already. The dominoes are falling right now. Global ecological cascading collapse. And with that in mind, let's add this truly disturbing headline from sfgate.com. Trump's face on new national park passes. I don't even know what words to use for this kind of insanity. The report states the new design does away with the traditional images of scenic vistas or species like bighorn sheep and instead shows Trump. Yes, we are truly free-falling into the twilight zone. Almost out of time. I want to ask this question. What about those that are truly giving their all to make a difference for the better in the orbiting asylum? What's their reward? Here's a timeless quote from the Stoic philosopher Seneca. The wages of a good deed is to have done it. I am grateful, he says, not in order that my neighbor, provoked by the earlier act of kindness, may be more ready to benefit me, but simply in order that I may perform a most pleasant and beautiful act. I feel grateful not because it profits me, but because it pleases me. End quote from Seneca. Doing what's right because it's right will always be right. No matter what others do or don't do, the correct, honorable, and moral use of our God-given will is a choice that each of us has been given. Now, more than ever, we must make the right choice. Now more than ever, we must make every single day count. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help in the all-important battle to fully expose and halt the insanity in our skies. Please make your voice heard while it can still make a difference. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.